So we live in a world when you say the phrase road bike, what you actually get are watered down road racing bikes. So carbon, stuffed to the gill with integrated and proprietary everything. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's sort of the equivalent of going into a car dealership looking for a nice, sporty, yet practical sedan, and everything that they've got on the lot are F1s or F1 lights. Enter the Montebello, a sort of anomaly in today's world of modern road bikes. Apologies again for all the air quotes here. In this video, I'm going to review the Montebello as well as philosophize a little bit about who it's for in 2024. And yes, that rhymed. Okay, so first off, the Montebello is available as a frame set only. This particular build was sent in full rain enduring livery, full coverage metal fenders, a small rain endure rack, and amazingly an all mechanical drivetrain. Of course, you're not limited into building it up in a Rando specific way. If you want to see a more modern build, definitely check out Nolan's review of the bike on the Bike Sauce YouTube channel. The bike uses Ritchey's triple butted steel, an elegant non-tapered head tube, and a carbon fork. Despite its classic looks, it does adhere to modern standards with rear axle wheels and flat mount disc brakes. This particular bike was a size medium, and even with all the rain enduring parts, the rack, the fenders, and all that stuff, and no particular weight weenie components, it came in respectably at just under 25 pounds, which I think is pretty good for a bike with a rack and full metal fenders. Equivalent early bikes that I reviewed in the past, when they're kitted out like this, they usually come in closer to 28 to 30 pounds. So while not light when compared to a road racing bike, it is light when compared to other bikes that are kitted out with racks and fenders. I'm not going to dive too much into the components because, again, frame set only, but I will mention some highlights. The SRAM shifters actually felt really good, shifted well. I missed the smaller brake levers of yore before they all became all bulbous and towers of power. Also, front shifting was surprisingly good. I didn't have any drop chains. I feel like much ado has been made over nothing over SRAM front shifting. I think these were perfectly fine. Other nice touches were the white industry cranks. They were, however, too long and a little overgeared for me. So for a majority of the review time, I actually swapped them out to the shorter 165mm spa cycle cranks. The chain rings are 42/26, and they were just a better fit in terms of length and gearing. Surprisingly, it was a straight swap. I didn't have to change the chain length or even move the front derailleur, and everything worked great. First off, we got to talk about what the Montebello is and what it isn't. It is most definitely a bike that's meant to be ridden on the road, all roads, if you will. Relatively smaller tire clearances indicate as much. However, if you're looking for a super reactive racing weapon, as the kids like to say, it's not that kind of road bike. According to Bike Insights, the chainstay length falls in that all-rounder category, in my opinion, of about 429, 430, and the trail is a standardish neutral trail of 62. A size medium is surprisingly big with an effective top tube of 56, whereas I feel equivalent size mediums usually are 54 or 55. So it's a long bike for its nominal size and something to be aware of. How this ultimately translates to the road is that it's a predictable and neutral handling bike that sort of disappears beneath you. It's not the kind of bike where if you stand on the pedals to climb, it doesn't have that jumpiness or reactive feeling beneath it. Rather, it's a smooth climber and gets to speed in a more composed yet efficient manner. If you're doing shorter rides with really hard efforts and want that reactive F1 feel, this bike isn't for you. Or rather, you could do that, but it will leave you a little wanting. I found that this bike really comes into its own and makes sense on longer rides. After you've worked out all the piss and vinegar and have settled in for some extended Zone 2 riding. See, I know some race words. On this build, despite having narrower roadish tires, I think they're 32 or 35, the bike was supple and comfortable and absorbed road imperfections even on some light gravel. It's not chattery or skittish. If it were a whiskey, it would be more of a 16-year smoky Islay Scotch than a shot of Jägermeister or Fireball in a loud bar. It's a sipping person's bike, or whiskey rather. That said, I don't want to give the impression that it's a touring bike. Just because it has racks and fenders doesn't mean it handles like a surly long haul trucker. It's a bit more responsive and has more get up and go than light tours like the Space Horse or the Salsa, and it's actually closer in geometry and handling, minus some of the tire clearance, to something like the Crust Dreamer, the All-City Cosmic Stallion, or the Salsa Warbird. So it falls into that all-roadish category. Most of the rides I took it on ended up on a little bit of gravel. That's just the routes that we ride around here. And as long as things didn't get too chonky or sandy, the bike handled it great. There's actually a fair amount of tire clearance if you forego the fenders. You could run it with a pair of 40s without fenders. It probably wouldn't be my first choice for extended forays into gravel, but if your ride sees some dirt, it's not going to melt. Don't be scared off by it. I think one area where this bike feels a bit different to other Ritcheys I've tried in the past is definitely the increased stack height. Usually with Ritcheys I've tried, it's a little bit of a challenge to get the bars level with the saddle. In this size medium, it wasn't a problem at all. In fact, I had to slam the stem a little to get it into a more comfortable riding position, which is an absolute first. Like I mentioned earlier, the bike also is pretty large for its nominal size. Usually I'm a size medium in Ritcheys I've tried, and I'd assume the same, but this is a much longer bike. So definitely take a close look at the geo numbers before committing. Who is this bike for? I think this is a great bike for someone that does lots of long rides and wants a reliable, smooth, and comfortable companion. It's also a great bike for someone that wants to do their own maintenance. It's all external. There's no weird proprietary parts or internal routing. You can still achieve classic bike looks, but be compatible with current standards. For someone that wants, a road bike, but feels like they're going to be LARPing if they get a plastic, fantastic carbon bike. Who is this bike not for? Well, I wouldn't say it's not capable of fast group riding. There might be better bikes for that. If you're looking for a bike with a super racy position and super reactive handling, this bike also isn't for you. I think ultimately the Montebello slots into that very kind of narrow and specific space of a sportive bike, sport tour, audax bike, something that balances comfort and performance while leaning a bit more stable in terms of handling. I've spoken about a lot of the pros. What are the cons? Like I mentioned, sizing is a challenge. Just because you ride a size medium, don't assume the same, and definitely do a deeper dive into the geo chart. There are no rear rack mounts. This is probably a signal that it's not meant to be a fully loaded touring bike, but some people may miss that utility. Another downside is that while this is a great bike for the road, it isn't what most people will conjure up in their heads when they think of the phrase road bike. Another potential con is that while the low bottom bracket adds to the feeling of being stable and planted in the bike, you definitely want to be careful when pedaling into corners, especially with a long crank, because it'll get a little slappy on the ground. Overall, the Montebello, like the Ritchey Outback I tested years ago, is a smooth riding bike from a great brand, and it lies in the nicer end of the current stock of production steel bikes. It has that feeling of a bike that's that step below going full custom. So if you're looking for a road bike in the larger philosophical sense of the word and aren't after a road racing bike, and if you're going to do long days in the saddle that aren't going to be ending in a field sprint, then definitely check out the Ritchey Montebello. But that's what I think. Let me know what you think about this bike in the comments below. Are you stoked on it? Is it a bit of an anomaly in 2024? If you guys like this content, please consider supporting the channel by joining us on Patreon or picking up some merch. That is how we keep the lights on here. As always, everybody, keep the supple side down.